Walk the Strip on a quiet weekday and you'll notice something that doesn't show up in glossy tourism reports. The casino floors feel lighter, the midweek towers glow half-empty, and the buzz that once pulsed through Las Vegas now comes and goes in uneven waves. But just days ago, in a room full of investors, MGM's CEO described a completely different city, one that's thriving, bustling, and stronger than ever. He cited big numbers, confident claims, and reassuring narratives. Yet the more you compare his words with the reality on the ground, the more the disconnect becomes impossible to ignore. So in this video, we go beneath the surface of each polished statement to reveal what they leave out, the missing context, the selective framing, and the truths that don't fit the corporate storyline. Because to understand what's really happening to Las Vegas, you have to look past the promises and listen to what the city itself is trying to tell you. Hornbuckle opens his defense with a headline built to impress: "We ran 98% occupancy." After a brutal summer for Las Vegas, with soft visitation, declining gaming revenue, and empty midweek floors, this number sounds like a miraculous rebound. But this is precisely where the first false claim begins, because that 98% figure is one of the most misleading statistics in the entire Vegas playbook. Here's why. First, that surge in occupancy is driven by isolated spikes, not stable demand. UFC fights, mega concerts, and weekend conventions can temporarily pack hotel towers, but they say nothing about the health of the other 4 or 5 days of the week. Second, high occupancy does not equal high profitability. Many of these rooms are deeply discounted, fully comped to loyalty players, or bundled into low-margin event packages that generate almost no gaming revenue. A full room is not the same as a profitable room, and MGM knows it. Third, the on-the-ground reality contradicts the narrative entirely. Walk the Strip on a Tuesday or Wednesday. You'll find quiet casino floors, long rows of unused slot machines, unsold midweek rooms, and bars shutting down early because there simply aren't enough guests to serve. These scenes are not signs of a healthy tourism ecosystem. They're symptoms of a city struggling to fill the gap between event weekends. And that leads to the most important point. Vegas is not being sustained by a stable visitor base. It's surviving off weekend sugar highs, brief bursts of activity that disappear the moment the event ends. This is not recovery, it is dependency. MGM highlights occupancy because it's a shallow metric that flatters the story. Occupancy counts bodies, not spending. It masks the collapse of midweek demand, the weakness in gambling revenue, and the shift of middle-class travelers who no longer see Vegas as good value. That's why the 98% figure is not proof of strength. It's camouflage. A glossy, convenient number used to hide a city running on life support. And if one statistic can distort the truth this much, the next false claim reveals even deeper cracks in the story MGM wants people to believe. Hornbuckle tries to downplay the downturn by calling the 11–12% drop in visitation during June and July a simple slowdown. He frames it as a temporary dip that shouldn't worry anyone, but this is where the second false claim reveals itself, because a double-digit decline in Las Vegas is not a minor setback, it's a red alert. For a city built on constant visitor flow, even a 3–4% drop is noticeable. An 11–12% fall means something far more serious is happening. It represents hundreds of thousands of missing tourists, people who should be filling hotel rooms, eating at restaurants, buying show tickets, gambling at the tables, and tipping service workers. When those visitors disappear, every layer of the Vegas economy feels the shock. Casinos run fewer tables, restaurants cut hours. Shows reduce cast or cancel nights entirely. Workers lose shifts, tips shrink, and many households living paycheck to paycheck suddenly find themselves unable to cover rent. This isn't a summer slump. This is structural damage. More importantly, the decline shows who is pulling back. Middle-class tourists and everyday gamblers, the core demographic that once powered Las Vegas for decades. They're staying home because prices have reached a breaking point. Rising resort fees, higher table minimums, expensive dining, inflated drink prices. Vegas has slowly priced out the very people who sustained it. Hornbuckle tries to offset this by pointing toward upcoming concerts, sporting events, and headline attractions, implying these moments will revive the city. But events like these are temporary spikes, not long-term solutions. They cannot replace the steady weekday traffic that keeps the city alive. A city that depends on isolated surges rather than consistent demand is a city already losing its footing. The decline in visitation is not a glitch in the system or a brief inconvenience. It is a clear warning sign of a deeper affordability crisis. And by waving it away with soft language, MGM isn't providing clarity. They're masking the truth. The real story isn't that visitation dropped, it's why it dropped. And that why points directly to systemic issues far bigger than a bad summer. Hornbuckle shifts the narrative by painting a nostalgic picture of value Vegas, claiming visitors can still enjoy affordable stays, cheap meals, and low-limit gambling. He points to examples like an $85 room at Excalibur, $5 blackjack tables, $5 beers, and a 3-course meal for $33. It sounds comforting, almost like Vegas hasn't changed. But this is where the third false claim becomes clear, because these examples are not representative. They are selective highlights designed to downplay the real cost structure of modern Las Vegas. Excalibur, the hotel he uses as proof, is the cheapest and most outdated MGM property on the Strip. It is an exception, not the rule, and using it to define the typical Vegas experience is deeply misleading. Even then, those supposedly low rates are only the starting point. Once resort fees, taxes, parking charges, and other hidden add-ons are included, the true nightly cost often doubles. A room advertised at $85 can easily creep past $150 or more, especially during weekends. The same selective framing applies to his examples of $5 tables and $5 beers. On most weekends, minimums jump to $15, $25, or even higher, and low-limit games nearly vanish from prime hours. Beer inside MGM resorts routinely costs $15 and $20, nowhere near the illustrative $5 he mentioned. This isn't value, it's illusion. Even more telling is what Hornbuckle leaves out. The traditional value pillars that once defined Vegas have largely disappeared. Cheap buffets are gone, free parking is gone, low table minimums are fading, complimentary drinks are tightly controlled by automated systems. What remains is a cost structure where every convenience carries a surcharge and every experience feels monetized. This shift transforms Vegas from an accessible getaway into what many visitors now describe as a money trap dressed in neon. The affordability that once made Vegas magical has eroded, replaced by aggressive fees and rising prices. The truth is simple. Modern Las Vegas is no longer the bargain destination it once was, and pretending otherwise ignores the lived reality of millions of visitors. Hornbuckle points to record revenues as proof that both MGM and Las Vegas are thriving, suggesting that rising financial performance reflects a strong and healthy market. But this is where the fourth false claim becomes obvious, because those revenue gains are not coming from organic growth or an expanding customer base. They are coming from extracting more money from fewer visitors. The reality is simple. MGM's revenue increases have been driven largely by higher resort fees, rising room rates, paid parking, elevated table minimums, surcharges, and a growing list of add-on fees. It's not that more guests are spending more money, it's that fewer guests are being charged significantly more. This kind of revenue growth may look impressive on paper, but it erodes long-term customer loyalty. Visitors may pay once, but they will think twice before returning. At the same time, the focus on revenue glosses over a more troubling reality: the decline in service quality, the burnout of overworked employees, and the deterioration of the overall customer experience. Workers report fewer shifts, lower tips, heavier workloads, and morale at some of the lowest levels in years. When service weakens, guests feel it. When guests feel it, they don't come back. MGM's narrative highlights top-line revenue because it hides these deeper cracks. But revenue without satisfaction is not strength, it is strain. And it raises an important question for any business built on repeat visitation. Would you rather have 3 million visitors spending modestly and returning year after year, or 2 million visitors spending more once but never coming back? The answer should be obvious for anyone thinking long-term. Yet MGM's strategy appears to prioritize short-term spikes over durable, sustainable growth. In hospitality, loyalty matters more than momentary profit, and Vegas is no exception. Record revenues might make headlines, but they do not make a healthy city. They do not reflect stable demand, vibrant tourism, or a strong middle-class customer base. They reflect a system that relies on squeezing the remaining visitors harder and harder, and that is not a sign of recovery, it's a warning. Hornbuckle attempts to shift responsibility by pointing to a dramatic-sounding metric: a 4% decline in Canadian visitors. He frames this as a major contributor to Las Vegas's recent weakness, implying that international travel, forces outside MGM's control, is to blame. But this is where the fifth false claim becomes clear, because even Hornbuckle himself admits that Canada represents only about 3% of total revenue. A 4% drop in a segment that's small barely moves the needle, and certainly cannot explain the broader downturn the city is facing. This is a classic misdirection. Highlight a number that sounds alarming while avoiding the metrics that truly matter. The real issue is not international visitors, it is domestic demand, especially among middle-class and regional travelers who are highly sensitive to rising costs. These are the people who used to fill the Strip midweek, drive in from nearby states, gamble casually, and eat at affordable buffets. But the rising cost structure of Las Vegas, higher resort fees, elevated table minimums, expensive parking, and inflated dining prices has quietly pushed many of these visitors out of the market entirely. They now have cheaper entertainment alternatives closer to home, from tribal casinos to regional resorts, and they no longer see Vegas as worth the premium. This internal weakness doesn't just affect the Strip. It ripples outward into smaller tourist towns and local businesses that rely on steady visitor spending. Restaurant owners, show producers, bartenders, and taxi drivers feel the impact long before revenue sheets do. While large corporate chains like MGM can shift resources internationally and diversify their revenue through markets like Macau or digital gaming, local economies cannot adapt as easily. They are the most vulnerable when domestic tourism falters. By pointing to Canada, MGM crafts a narrative that blames external factors instead of addressing the structural affordability issues driving Americans away. The decline in visitation is not primarily a story about passports, visas, or border policy. It is a story about value, pricing, and the shifting priorities of the American middle class. The city is not struggling because fewer Canadians are flying in. It is struggling because fewer everyday Americans can justify the cost of coming back. Hornbuckle expands his list of explanations by pointing to federal policy changes. A $250 increase in visa fees, cuts to America's tourism marketing budget, and reductions in FAA funding. He frames these issues as major contributors to Las Vegas's downturn, suggesting that government missteps, not MGM's decisions, lie at the heart of the problem. But this is where the sixth false claim becomes clear, because while policy shifts can influence travel patterns, they cannot explain the core problem facing Las Vegas today: the decline in domestic visitors and the soaring cost of the Vegas experience. International tourists were never the majority of Vegas's customer base, and visa fees do not determine whether Americans from California, Arizona, Utah, or the Midwest decide to come for a weekend. What truly determines that is affordability, and affordability has eroded not because of Washington, but because of decisions made inside boardrooms. Over the past decade, corporate strategies have raised room rates, increased resort fees, added parking charges, inflated table minimums, and introduced a growing list of surcharges. These choices have made the product itself harder to access, regardless of government policy. That is the uncomfortable truth missing from MGM's narrative. Lobbying for more federal marketing dollars is meaningless if the destination feels overpriced and unwelcoming. You cannot market your way out of a value problem. Visitors will not return to a place where the experience no longer matches the cost, no matter how many tourism campaigns are launched. And they certainly will not return if the businesses themselves treat them like revenue targets instead of guests. Meanwhile, focusing blame on Washington distracts from the corporate decisions that hold far more influence over visitor behavior. Resort fees alienate travelers. High minimum bets push out casual gamblers. Expensive dining and drink prices strain budgets. These are not federal policy issues, they are business model issues, and they impact Las Vegas far more powerfully than a visa fee increase or a marketing budget cut ever could. The decline in visitation is not primarily the fault of government actions. It is the predictable result of rising prices, declining value, and the gradual erosion of the guest experience. Corporate choices created this environment, and no amount of political scapegoating will change that. When you step back from the individual claims and look at Hornbuckle's interview as a whole, a clear pattern emerges. It functions less like an honest assessment and more like a carefully engineered PR message designed to calm investors. The strategy follows a familiar arc: highlight selective metrics such as weekend occupancy spikes and record revenues, rely on outlier examples of affordability like a discounted room at Excalibur or a filer table, shift responsibility toward outside forces such as international travel declines or federal policy changes, and ignore the root cause driving Vegas's current struggles, the erosion of domestic visitation and the rising cost of experiencing the city. Beneath the polished numbers lies a more sobering reality. Las Vegas is now extracting more money from fewer visitors, a dynamic that boosts short-term revenue while quietly damaging its long-term appeal. The city's rising prices and shrinking value proposition are pushing away the middle-class guests who built its reputation. And as they stay home, the people who feel it first are not investors. They are workers, small businesses, and the local communities whose livelihoods depend on steady tourism. The economic gravity is shifting, and no amount of selective statistics can disguise it. That's why evaluating the health of Las Vegas requires looking beyond headline numbers. Occupancy rates and revenue totals tell only part of the story. What truly matters is the lived experience, whether visitors feel the trip is worth the cost, whether workers can survive on their wages, and whether the city still delivers the sense of excitement and value that once defined it. If affordability continues to decline, no marketing campaign or corporate reassurance will be enough to bring people back. Vegas doesn't just need bigger numbers, it needs to rebuild trust and restore value. After hearing this full breakdown, it's clearer than ever that the real story of Las Vegas isn't written in selective statistics or corporate reassurance. It's written in the everyday experiences of visitors and workers who keep this city alive. So now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Vegas can rebuild its value, or are rising prices slowly pushing people away for good? Share your thoughts below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dive reports, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the headlines. This channel exists to cut through the noise and show you the real Las Vegas, the one behind the neon. When you step back from the individual claims and look at Hornbuckle's interview as a whole, a clear pattern emerges. It functions less like an honest assessment and more like a carefully engineered PR message designed to calm investors. The strategy follows a familiar arc, highlights selective metrics such as weekend occupancy spikes and record revenues, rely on outlier examples of affordability like a discounted room at Excalibur or a $5 table, shift responsibility toward outside forces such as international travel declines or federal policy changes, and ignore the root cause driving Vegas's current struggles, the erosion of domestic visitation and the rising cost of experiencing the city. Beneath the polished numbers lies a more sobering reality. Las Vegas is now extracting more money from fewer visitors, a dynamic that boosts short-term revenue while quietly damaging its long-term appeal. The city's rising prices and shrinking value proposition are pushing away the middle-class guests who built its reputation. And as they stay home, the people who feel it first are not investors. They are workers, small businesses, and the local communities whose livelihoods depend on steady tourism. The economic gravity is shifting, and no amount of selective statistics can disguise it. That's why evaluating the health of Las Vegas requires looking beyond headline numbers. Occupancy rates and revenue totals tell only part of the story. What truly matters is the lived experience, whether visitors feel the trip is worth the cost, whether workers can survive on their wages, and whether the city still delivers the sense of excitement and value that once defined it. If affordability continues to decline, no marketing campaign or corporate reassurance will be enough to bring people back. Vegas doesn't just need bigger numbers, it needs to rebuild trust and restore value. After hearing this full breakdown, it's clearer than ever that the real story of Las Vegas isn't written in selective statistics or corporate reassurance. It's written in the everyday experiences of visitors and workers who keep this city alive. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Vegas can rebuild its value, or are rising prices slowly pushing people away for good? Share your thoughts below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dive reports, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the headlines. This channel exists to cut through the noise and show you the real Las Vegas, the one behind the neon.